Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa discussed political and economic ties that the two countries share and how they plan to make them stronger, not only on the people front, but more importantly, the economic reforms that are needed. Let's take a look. It's been 30 years since the establishment of the Bi-National Commission, which oversees bilateral agreements between South Africa and Nigeria. 3 decades later, 65% of total trade South Africa has with West Africa comes from Nigeria. But as much as there was fanfare about Cyril Ramaphosa hosting his first state visit here of President Muhammadu Buhari, there was an elephant in the room, and that elephant is the recent attacks on foreign nationals. So, we started off with an apology.
Mr. President, I'd like to take this opportunity to reiterate South Africa's and our government's deep regret at the incidents of public violence that erupted in some parts of our country a few weeks ago. Some of the acts of violence were directed at foreign nationals, and some of whom coming from your own country.
Both leaders condemned the recent xenophobic attacks, with President Muhammadu Buhari going as far as to say that it shows it's a competition for resources at the lowest levels. But he hopes that his visit will enhance some of the agreements that are already in existence, update those that have expired, and also increase the level of investments between both countries.
It is trade, investment, energy, mining, defense, and security issues, police affairs, immigration, tourism, and environmental, among others. We stress the need to implement agreements in force, ratify signed agreements not in force, and renew expired agreements.
Ministers of trade between both countries will have a place of prominence here because only they can really move the trade needle. I asked South Africa's Minister of Trade and Industry, Ibrahim Patel, what are some of those low-hanging fruits?
Increasing tourism between our two countries. Both countries are beautiful places and are potential opportunities for us as Africans to see more of our own continent. There are many Nigerians who'd like to do that. So it's us working hard to get the visa regime on a platform where it is simpler and easier for people to visit each other's countries. The second one is increased trade, selling more manufactured goods to each other. When you go to shops in Nigeria and in South Africa, you'll see huge volumes of goods that are made elsewhere in the world, not on the African continent. Let's replace that. And the third one is increased investment. We already have significant South African investment in Nigeria, but we can also benefit from Nigerian investment. We have at the moment investment from the United States, from China, from Germany. These are important ways of generating jobs locally here in South Africa. We now want to make sure that we deepen the investment by African entrepreneurs in the South African economy, and of course by South African businesses in the Nigerian economy. These are areas that contain within them some low-hanging fruit.
Both presidents have affirmed their support for the South Africa-Nigeria Business Forum, which will tee things off following the official ceremony here. But Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari was a no-show at the SA-Nigeria Business Forum, much to the disappointment of the many business leaders which were in attendance. Dianna Games never misses those kinds of golden opportunities. She's the executive director actually, of the South Africa-Nigeria Business Chamber and joins me now via Skype. Dianna, thank you again for your time as always. Did Muhammadu Buhari miss a golden opportunity here to spur along business between the two countries?
I think symbolically it would have been important for him to be at the business forum, particularly at this moment when the two countries are talking very proactively about how to increase trade and investment, particularly with the view to getting more Nigerian business in South Africa. So I do think it was a shame, and I wouldn't say it's a lost opportunity, but the optics in this relationship are important, and it would have been a show of confidence to have had him in the room. And as you say, many people were very disappointed that he didn't arrive. I don't think it affects the way we will move this thing forward, but as I say, it was a pity.
2 years after President Cyril Ramaphosa introduced new measures, namely one of them being a walk back, if you will, to the visa regime we used to have under Malusi Gigaba, Nigerians are still struggling with accessing this particular country. How bad is that for business tourism in particular?
Now, that is a real lost opportunity. We keep being told that the problem is that there's a backlog of visas at the South African diplomatic missions in Nigeria. But we have battled, and people, businesses, our members, trying to get Nigerians to come to South Africa for training, for board meetings, for business, and even for holidays. It has been a battle. It can take up to a month, and in fact, some cases longer, for people to simply get a visa for a short visit. So I think that is definitely affecting. It's not just about the actual travel, it's about the sense of being welcome in this country. The harder we make it for people to get here, the more people feel that they are not welcome here. And I think there's already a sense of that after the attacks on foreigners over the years.
Let's speak about something that guides this entire relationship, if you will, between Nigeria and South Africa. And that's the Binational Commission, which has been in existence for the past 20 years. It has over 32 agreements as we speak. Now it's being elevated to state level. Let me tell you what I hear when something is elevated to state level. It means it's not working.
There's been so many agreements signed. There's been complaints that a lot of them haven't been ratified, that some of them are maybe not that useful anymore. I mean, after 20 years, business priorities change, and political priorities. So I do think it seems there has been a review of these agreements. I'm not quite sure where we are with all of them, but simply having agreements in place doesn't make things better. It doesn't necessarily make things work. A lot of them are symbolic, or are in agreements in principle about a number of issues, important as those issues are. We need some proactive things that we can touch, some tangible outcomes that will drive this business relationship forward. And I think the binational is important as a mechanism, but I would hope that it would be far more effective than it has been.
Dianna, you and I met at the South Africa-Nigeria Business Forum last week, where President Cyril Ramaphosa was. They spoke about the recent xenophobic attacks, which kind of took center stage within this state visit by the Nigerian president. But they also spoke about the need to establish an early warning system so that they can better handle any eruption if it happens again. To me, it says that they think that it could happen again. What would that mean for a current relationship that we have, considering that Nigerians are still up in arms, considering that we didn't offer any compensation for the last attacks on foreign nationals and their properties?
I think it's simplistic to think that nothing will ever happen again simply because we've had a state visit, and simply because South Africa is taking it a lot more seriously possibly than it has in the past. I know that there's a lot. It's a complex issue. It's not simply about attacks. It's a complex socio-economic kind of web of issues that this is an outcome from that. So it's not that easy to just tackle it. And I think everybody, much as people are looking for solutions, it's not a short-term solution to this. There has to be a lot of work done on many different levels. And when you're talking about poverty and crime, these things have become so entrenched in South Africa, it's going to be very difficult to turn them around. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And an early warning system, I don't know if that would work, because it relies a lot on intelligence, and some of these things can be very quick and ad hoc and like a bushfire, spread very quickly. But I think what is important, that the leaders actually, when these things happen, that the leaders are seen to be working together to address the issues and that are arising from this, rather than it becoming a hugely divisive issue again, as it has this time around. It seems South Africa, by all accounts, is seeking solutions and is looking to do the right thing. And I think some credit has to be given that even if this breaks out again, we need to work together harder to make to address these issues. There are no short-term solutions to this problem, unfortunately.
Dianna, for those who are not in the know, apart from our massive import of crude from Nigeria, some chemical-based products and those kinds of sectors, why is Nigeria such an important trading partner for South Africa? Why are we trying so hard to make sure that we have a good relationship with Nigeria?
Well, a lot of people assert that the relationship, a strong relationship between these two countries, is important for the good of the continent. I would argue that that is true, but I think it's particularly important for each of the regions, and these countries represent a huge percentage of the GDP of each region. But I think as in Africa, as the intra-Africa free trade area signals, we need to grow African business and trade, and if the two biggest economies can do that, that's certainly a very positive signal for the rest of Africa. And I think also it's important that we are strategic to each other in certain ways. We are a recipient of a large amount of crude oil. Our companies are many of our companies are very big in Nigeria. There's many Nigerians that live in South Africa. The countries are very intertwined. Whether people think that works or not, that is the case. There are many Nigerians here. And I think I guess there's often the argument who needs the other more. I don't think that's really helpful to talk about that. We are very inextricably linked economies, and I think that we could do a lot more to build that profile. There are huge opportunities given the size of the two economies, the sophistication and the comparative advantages that we have. There's a lot that we could share and build. And unfortunately there's a lot of petty sort of irritants like visas that have got in the way over the years, and we hope that this will be a good opportunity, that that a crisis has often unlocks a new way of approaching a problem. And I'm hoping, or we certainly hope, that this will be the case in the next year, and we as the Chamber will certainly do our utmost to try and do what we can to make sure that this does happen.
And there is a lot of work to be done before that Abuja meeting next year, where we check up on the progress of the Bi-National Commission. But there's some 120 South African companies of repute in Nigeria, and that relationship remains squarely in favor of South Africa. What do we need to woo more Nigerian businesses to South Africa? I asked the Minister of Trade in that country if we need a special incentives for Nigerian businesses to come and invest here. What do you think?
I think that that's something that has been spoken about before. I think we also have to look at the market forces involved here. Nigeria is a huge market with huge market gaps, and there are many opportunities there for all companies wanting to invest, including Nigerian companies. So, do Nigerian companies want to come to South Africa just to balance the numbers? That may not be strategic for them. And I think we have to really ask the big Nigerian companies why they are not in South Africa before we consider any measures like that. I think it would be great if we had more brand names here from Nigeria. But is that in the best interest of those businesses who have lots of low-hanging fruit elsewhere on the continent and in their own country as well? I don't know, but I certainly think we could look at ways that we can improve that. And one of those ways is to find out, why are they not here? Do they want to come here? Has there been a problem with people investing here? Is that why they're not here? Or is it simply a market issue where this is not where they see the return on investment being the greatest in terms of the rest of the continent, which is it's a huge market for these companies.
Dianna Games, as always, I thank you for your time. She is the Executive Director of the SA Nigeria Business Chamber.